Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Hello, welcome back to Fighting on Film. Now this week, I'm no longer alone. Matt's back from Spain, everybody.
Hello, at last. The plan was to continue recording while I was away, but like all good plans, they never survived contact with the enemy, and Murphy's Law took effect, and what we did record turned out to be terrible. So this is
Matt ended up like Optimus Prime when I tried to edit you.
It's like a bad one. Yeah,
it was. You were like an Autobot. It was a bit weird. It was just a bit like, this isn't right. And then messaged Matt, and he was like, "Oh no, I didn't record me talking at all. I just did it."
Well, I was on a phone, so I
know. Yeah,
the app doesn't give you the option to record. Anyway, that's
Matt was in opulence, and I was in the trenches slogging to get an episode out.
Rob kept everything together. So absolute props to you on that one.
Us boots on the ground.
Cracking episode with Woody last week. Brilliant.
Oh, it was great, wasn't it? Yeah.
This week, we would have done this a couple of weeks ago, but this week we're having an homage to SSVC. Now,
yes.
What's SSVC? Everyone's saying, what the hell is this?
New listeners are shocked. Old listeners are rubbing their hands with glee.
This is true. If you caught our earlier episode about some of the really cool British Army on the Rhine training videos that we did with Kenton White a little while back, you'll recognize the name SSVC, and it's a production company essentially that is linked to the British Army and the British military, has a long history of other production companies in the background, but SSVC, Services Sound and Vision Corporation, formed in 1982 out of the Services Cinema Corporation and BFBS, which gets a bit confusing because BFBS continues on.
Yeah.
And there's lots of other antecedent companies like the Army Kinematic.
Yeah. It's loads.
Corporation or service. And there's loads of really cool stuff. And we will do like a proper history of the SSVC at some point. But there's actually quite a dearth of information about it online anyway. And we've had to pull together a bit of a list of all the various productions they did over the years, and we tried. But we do know that in 1996, the British Defence Film Library was formed. All the stuff that came out around the time about that noted that there was 3,500 films that were in the archive that have been made over the past 40 years. So SSVC, it is the latest, or was the latest iteration of this long history of British Army training films and Royal Navy and Air Force as well, training films where they created these really interesting training films that not only tried to train troops with scenarios and such, but they also made things like documentaries. So in this episode, we're going to talk about 3 that we've picked that we like, and they'll give you a bit of a flavour for the work that SSVC did. It's just our little homage to a really cool element that no one seems to know about. We see these training films online, but we don't realise that there was
the extensive amount of work that this company did.
There was an umbrella
conglomerate did,
corporation putting these things together. Really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And if you listen to our episode with Kenton White a few months ago, you'll know the vibe that me and Matt get from these. We just think they're so interesting and important, not within filmmaking as well. They're interesting because the budgets aren't massive, but the production values are very high.
Yeah. And
in historical sense, you can learn a lot about the time and the period when these were made, socially, politically. It's very interesting. But before we move on, if you saw us at We Have Ways Fest, we might have been wearing our Fighting on Film SSVC logo hoodies.
Inspired by.
Yeah, they're not endorsed, inspired by. Matt designed them, actually. So, yeah, please go and check out the Fighting on Film merchandise store, and you too can own your very own Fighting on Film
inspired FOF
t-shirt or hoodie. Yeah. And not only will you help us keep the lights on here, but you'll look darn cool to about the 3 or 4 people who will recognize what the logo is in the street. But for those 3 people that do, it'll make their day, I assure you. So please
that
have a look.
logo is based on the 80s SSVC logo that was on at the start and at the end of some of the really well-known ones that we've already covered, like
Fighting in Woods, Soviet Encounter, yet to be talked about, Fighting in Villages, but we'll get there.
Ooh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Rob and I were like, God, that is a really cool logo. So we thought, as an homage to the SSVC, I went away and did a little bit of design work and matched the colours and stuff, and put together a little thing as a surprise for Rob, actually. And I was like, Rob, what I made?
It was amazing. I was like, wow, like so good. Like it looks great. If we didn't use the badge, I'd have used that.
I really love it.
It's great.
Wore the hoodie on a little trip to Wales a little while back. And then we wore it at We Have Waste Fest. It's such a comfy hoodie.
It's nice. It's so really nice. And
anyway,
also Patreon. Before plug. Of course, little plug there. We're allowed ourselves a little plug from time to time. But yeah, of course, Patreon members, supporting cast members, do use your FOF discount at the discount. Do use your discount when you're checking out to get 10% off. And if you'd like 10% off, you can join the FOF Patreon and get a 10% off discount code just for pledging. So, double plug.
It makes sense to me.
Exactly. That's like one of they're really bad 50s adverts. Oh, it makes sense to this guy over here. Moving on. Bruneval Raid, Operation Pitting, 1982.
Yes, let's start with documentary. So as I mentioned earlier, they made documentaries, they made training films. They even had a kids' TV channel for a while.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
In the 70s, 80s. Sorry, in the 80s, 90s. But the Bruneval Raid documentary it's amazing because it's a recreation of Operation Pitting, and it takes you through the raid using serving members of the parachute regiment in is it 1980?
1982
that was made? Yeah, I think it was 2, wasn't it? And it does this, but it also combines it with some really cool audio interview overdubs with chaps that were actually on the raid, veterans, and it gives you insights into what they did and what they were thinking and how they felt, and it just creates this really tight, interesting documentary because it tells the story, but there's also really interesting visuals where they've used the serving guys at the time to recreate the raid, and it gives you these great little scenes where they're in like a planning meeting or an O group, and they're on a map table pointing out what's going to happen, and there's a model of the site they're raiding, and it's just really cool.
It's not something you think of when you think of like a British Army film. You think it'd be a bit sort of like stuffed shirt, very a bit more of a lecture style. But there's the professor starts and he's saying, I think we should, I think the landing beach was perfect. It was placed perfectly to where the radar was. And I think we could go in there and take it. I'm paraphrasing, but he just says something so nonchalant, like, I think we could go in there and take it. And it's like...
the whole film begins with that little intro from, I think it's Professor R.V. Jones, who was one of the top British scientists at the time.
Intelligence officers,
they needed this part of the German radar network to, obviously that's handy to have. And they were like, this looks like a cracking site for a parachute raid or a commando raid. So they went to combined services, didn't they?
Combined operations. Yeah. And they they started in motion. And it tells you how the paratroopers went.
Story.
Yeah, like the paratroopers went, they were being told they were training for this sort of parade for the Prime Minister, or this like showing the Prime Minister what they could do, demonstration. And then, the minute that the operation is live, they're told, no, it's not for that. You're going in, it's a proper operation, it's a proper raid. And it just switches from this really cool reconstruction that works really well. They're obviously serving paratroops because they're doing everything right. They look good in the denizens, although they shouldn't be wearing denizens because They wouldn't have
I
Denisons
think
at the
they're
time.
wearing the 60s pattern Denison.
Banana pattern. Yeah, is a bit. They would have.
They got Brem Mark 3s as well at one point, which is not quite right.
Matt's like, got the wrong Bren.
We'll let them off. It's okay.
But no, I think because it makes sense though, because that's what. Yeah, these films we've got to remind the listener that these aren't made for general consumption. The fact we can view them now on YouTube and IWM Archive is great, but these weren't meant to be shown outside the forces. So I think using the Denisons there that's the iconography of the parachute regiment. That's what para thinks of. If they're wearing their DPM smock in 1982, it's pretty much the same. You know, the camouflage has changed. So that's what you think of when you think of it. That's the reason I think they did it. At the time, they were actually wearing a brown type smock that was based off the Fallschirmjägers jumpsuits, I think. Yeah. And they had those like sort of jump helmet things. But it's really interesting. And even down to like them wearing 58 pattern belts in the briefing, because that's probably all they got with them because they're current issue.
But the thing is, it shows you a little bit of them clearing the house. It shows them clearing slit trenches. It shows them stealing the parts. And then it shows them evacuating, exfilling off the beach on landing craft. And it's value for money. It's really good.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's never actually appeared on film other than in Paratrooper with Alan Ladd, has it? That's the only
the Red Beret
of it.
It's the only representation of that on screen that I can find. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a bad one. It's about 10 minutes of the film because they concentrate the latter part of them landing in North Africa.
In a quarry.
In a quarry, yes. I think they used up they must have used all their budget up on the biting section, which isn't actually bad because when I watched them together, one after the other, it's not bad. It's just a shame that film. We'll do that film one day because that's an interesting movie to talk about.
A good episode actually to discuss that because there's interesting aspects of that, and they do one of our boys' day on that one, don't they?
I'll just wait. I'm seething. Like when I watched that movie for the first time, I was like,
poor Stan.
Yeah, poor Stan. That's all we're gonna say. They do him dirty. The year that he rose to fame as well. Anyway, I'll stop because I'll go on forever about it.
Let's move on before we
Let's move on. Oh, and we can't leave the Brynneval Raid film without mentioning the line that basically they end on, where that one chap who's on the raid says, "The Boffins must have wanted it for something." It's just I love that. Best.
It's so good. It's so good.
It's such a British Army
those
way
the audio interviews that they overdub add so much to it. It's so brilliantly done.
And for a 20-minute video, it might as well be an hour long with the amount of effort they put into it. It's fabulous.
And there's they made so many of those. Like they made Falklands in '85 series. Yep. They made that Rhineland series with Richard Todd doing the
really
overdub,
good.
Which was great in '84. Yeah. They did D-Day in 1994, and they did an Ardennes one in 1980 as well. So they did loads of these really, really nicely put together, well-produced documentary. They have that World at War feel.
That's it. World at War. Yeah.
That quality 80s feel.
Yeah. But they haven't aged either.
No.
Well. That's really something good. It's like War Walks. It doesn't age. Yeah. But and there's also as well, like I think there's a YouTube channel that's trickling them out every now and then. It's like a British Army documentary channel. That's one I'd recommend to all the listeners. Go and subscribe to that channel if you haven't already.
That one, I believe, is up on IWM as well.
Yes, I think it is too.
So, so it's easily all of these are actually available either on YouTube or IWM, so you can catch them. They're all three of these that we're going to talk about today are well worth checking.
Well worth your time, definitely.
I think we'll cover Fighting Patrol next, which it's the classic scenario-driven training film.
Yes.
Where they show step by step how something will happen or should happen.
Yeah, best case. It's always best case scenario with these British ones. Yeah,
we discussed that when we did the a couple of the others, Fighting in Woods, etc. It's the best possible case scenario. Everything's there might be artillery, but you don't need to worry about the artillery. No. It'll be fine.
Shrapnel doesn't exist.
Well, yeah. So Fighting Patrol is a really interesting one. Mid-80s, and it looks at it's actually a two-parter because the first element of it is Recce Patrol. So a small section-based patrol goes out and finds a Soviet position.
A motor rifle platoon, Matt.
Thank you. Because it's Cold War gone hot.
Every single thing the British infantry fight in those videos is motor rifle platoons and nothing else. Absolutely love it.
They're the vanguard, Rob.
They're fighting the vanguard. Yeah, all the time.
Yeah. You have to stop them. You have to stop them. You have to make them dismount, Rob.
That's the key. The golden ticket to killing motor rifle divisions. Get them to fucking dismount.
Awkwardly at the back of their BTRs. So it begins with recce patrol. They find the motor rifle platoon, and then they decide we're gonna attack the larger Russian element in a village. But before we do that, we also need to take out this Russian patrol position that's guarding the route forward. So they set up a fighting patrol, and it's really interesting because it shows all the nuance and the step by step of how they get ready for this. It's also matter of fact. It's like there's one bit where the narrator, who is the same chap that we loved from Fighting in Woods, etc.
Yeah,
where he goes, there's 100 things that you need to prepare for the fighting patrol, but you're lucky if you get time to do it. Also, I paraphrase badly because I haven't watched it in a little while. But
no, it is. It's all very matter of fact. You won't have enough time to do everything, but make sure your weapons and your webbing's right, things like that. It's stuff the troops would know anyway, but it's sort of just telling them, look, when you're doing this sort of thing, you're not going to have all the time in the world to do it, so you better be sure that you're ready. And actually, you mentioned that the narrator's the same. It's the same director, actually, as Fighting in Woods, called Rene Basilico, and he did lots and lots of SSVC work. We're not sure if he's still with us. I hope he is. But yeah, like he must have.
It'd be great to talk to some of the people that
it would be, wouldn't it?
These.
Yeah, wondering what the budgets were like, things like that, because it's another thing this film does really well. It's probably just shot in a wood somewhere, probably the same wood as Fighting in Woods, to be fair.
Probably. It's probably Salisbury Plain somewhere.
Yeah, it probably is. But it looks great. It's shot at night, and it's so hard to make out what's going on because the VHS rip isn't fantastic, but it probably wasn't fantastic at the time, I'm thinking.
There's probably a cracking piece of film reel with it all on that looks
there must be somewhere.
And one day, hopefully, it'll get digitized and be available.
Yeah. And interesting enough, they've all armed with early SA-80s, very early ones.
They are. They're all armed with like brand new kit.
Yeah.
So there's another film out there that wasn't made by SSVC, but it is a British Army training film or presentation film. British Army equipment of the 1980s, I think it's.
That's
like
great. That is so good.
Such an interesting.
It's got like a whole 10-15 minutes on how you pack a Saxon, and it's just absolute war porn. It's so good. So much so that my missus even 3D printed me a Saxon because I was so obsessed with them.
Well, I mean, the Russians are currently showing a captured one at Army 2022 in Moscow.
Are they?
That they captured in Ukraine.
Oh my God.
And they're still trundling around in Ukraine. Ukrainians are still using them. But that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the SA-80. So yeah, they're all XL85 E-series guns. So they're just before mass production.
Okay.
So much so that the light support weapons, the LSWs, are the earlier L73 versions, which don't have that long sponsor underneath the barrel, where they attach the bipod at the front by the muzzle rather than.
I couldn't even see that. I mean, well done.
I know, it's blinking, you miss it.
Matt's gone frame by frame.
Enhance, yeah.
Magnify.
Pure CSI. But there's other cool stuff in there, like spyglass thermal imager, night vision optics.
Yeah.
Just all cutting edge, brand new kit that they're pushing into these films. They're not even in like general issue yet, but they're putting them in there to show them because they know that these films are going to be watched for years to come. Yeah,
because obviously at the time we didn't. The MOD, the politicians didn't know when the Cold War was going to end. So we've got hindsight watching these.
After the Cold War ends, the British Army's got to train and know how to do a fighting patrol.
I always think, how many guys do you think watched this in like 1989, early 1990, and then they were sent to the desert to fight the Gulf War. It's just because we weren't expected to fight that sort of war. But I think it's very interesting that most of the lads that went and fought in the Gulf War were BAOR guys. It's the most British thing ever. Plan for something in one whole part of the world, and then, oh no, the actual next war you fight is in hot climate in the desert. It's very funny, but it's a great film, and it follows on from, like, you could stitch together fighting in woods, fighting in villages, this Recce Patrol, the snipers, effects of artillery fire, sappers in support. You could stitch
Demo
all these
guard.
together. Demo cards. I mean, yeah. I mean, to me and Matt, this is like people rattling off The Godfather, Godfather 2. It's like that for us.
This is what Rob and I bonded over initially.
It is. It really is.
After we decided to do the podcast and we were chatting about things, and we'd be planning what we were going to do, we'd also be like just going through the Imperial War Museum catalogue, going, "Oh my God, look at this! Have you seen this?" Or what was on YouTube. Cold War British Army is something both of us are really interested in research-wise, and these are brilliant pieces for doing, historical research into tactics, doctrine, equipment.
There's one thing I wanted to ask you, Matt. I don't know if you noticed it, but those SA-80s never fire. There's only one firing GPMG in that film.
Yeah, because they talk about getting all the GPMGs together, don't they, from the company?
Yeah.
And they have like a base of fire, and then there's a maneuver element that punches through with the SA-80s that don't seem to do a lot of firing. But
no,
I mean, perhaps that was it's just not necessary, or didn't have enough 5.56 hanging around, or maybe
maybe they've got to go back to the factory after you've shot or something.
That's what makes all this so fascinating. But yeah, you get lots of GPMG action though,
and of course the motor rifle division are destroyed, and the BAOR is about 2-0 up
by a single fighting patrol.
While I was like planning this episode, I was thinking, hang on a minute. So I've seen about 7 or 6 of these BAOR era Cold War gone hot type training movies. Are they based in the week that the BAR was meant to be surviving after then? And they run out of stuff. Because when we did the Kenton episode, he talked about how supply issues and the escalation in budget for the MOD in the 80s and 70s made it so that at any one given moment, the BAOR probably had about 2 weeks worth of readiness or something. Even so much so that
they all run in together, don't they? So
exactly.
All of these, they kind of just like gel together in your mind after you've watched them a couple of times, and
they're on the same front. They're on the same little bit of a Rhine. Yeah, because that's interesting. That whole, read Kenton's book, buy Kenton's book, guys, if you haven't. Called Ever Ready. Absolutely. Never Ready. It's called. Buy that book if you haven't. But he even about those supply shortages. They even mention it in the 80s British Army drama called Spearhead. That they mentioned that not having any, is it swing fire missiles?
Yeah, I think so.
For the Daimler Foxes.
Yeah,
Ferrets, sorry. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, it's that bad that it's seeping into dramas written by civilians. It's like, oh my God, okay. But anyway, moving on to the last film in our cavalcade of SSVC films.
The best for last, possibly.
So the last film in our SSVC cavalcade is SBS Oil Safe from 1980.
Ooh, this is tasty stuff. When we found this, we were amazed.
To quote the great AC Harriet, spicy.
So after a recording, we were doing a bit of planning, and then we just always seem to end up going, "Have you seen this?" And then we ended up on an IWM rabbit hole, and we found this had been digitized, and it's one of a series, and it's the only part that's actually been digitized. So someone must have requested it at some point, and paid for it to be digitized. And was it worth it? It definitely was, because it's another one of those films that takes you through a scenario step by step.
Yep.
Like Fighting Patrol and some of the others. It shows you the tactics and doctrine of how the SBS would attack and retake a captured oil rig, and that's all the film's about. And it's great. It starts off with like a couple of lads like sat in their living rooms looking awkward, or driving down the road in their Austin Allegra, and then their pages go off, and their faces and like just go right, business time, pulls a J-turn, back to base, cuts to like a lad.
It's literally the profession. It's the start of a professionals episode, really isn't it? It really you just expect the theme tune to jump in, don't you?
You could actually recut. You could splice that in.
I might do that
if I can. Reaction shots from Bodie and Doyle.
Dun, dun. Get the oil rig needs to be retaken. Get the SBS. Get them to take back the oil rig.
Cut to a table full of Mac 10s. Because you do. It shows you the SBS team getting the kit together, packing duffel bags, and there's this beautiful scene where they're taking inventory, Browning high powers, AR-15s, Remington 870 breaching shotguns.
It's a filthy Mac little 10s. Table, isn't it? It's a filthy little table of firearms.
It's knee rubbing. It's a very serious piece where I don't know what the audience for this was. Perhaps it was police and other elements that were going to be working with the SBS.
Oh,
and
it was filmed as part of a series called SBS Procedure.
I think this possibly was for people outside of the SBS to watch this, because the narration talks about how the SBS, while they're representing this one type of oil platform, they've looked at the plans for every type in existence and formulated the plans for assaults on all the different types of rig, and how they would get onto them, and how they would infiltrate, all the little nuances, because it begins with a little thing where it explains that this is filmed during the day. The raid would take place at night. This is so you can see what would happen. It shows integration with the army, shows integration with the police, national police, local police, how they go from planning, breakdown of negotiations, to the assault, and what happens afterwards as well. Because there's that really interesting little bit where they assault and
they win. Not going to lose their own training video, are they?
They shoot one of the terrorists, and then a policeman comes onto the rig, and he's like, "Okay, who shot this chap?" And he's like, "Well, I shot him. There's spent cases there, and there.
Shoot him." He just
put like 3 rounds in him.
Read the wall with him. Oh my God. Those two chaps barely move, and they get lit up.
He goes, "I'm going to have to take this Luger as evidence." The deniable Luger.
Picks up a borrow, sticks it in a little paper envelope. Yeah,
and then that's it. It's really interesting because it shows that procedure.
It's really something. And obviously it's 1980, so it does feel a bit professionals, but
you got like ropey perms,
some flares,
terrible Irish accents.
Yeah.
We've taken the rig. I'm like, oh my God, what was that supposed to be?
Oh my God, it's worse than my accents that I do.
Like, oh my God. But
and then the guard, the terrorist guard guarding the helipad's got an M1 car bomb with no mag in it. And it's like, what's he going to do? If he's lucky, he's chambered 1 round really awkwardly. He's gonna get 1 round off. But no, it's really good. And we'd love to see the entire SBS procedure. I mean, we hope that they all get digitized. But yeah, I love that one. It's great. I don't really know what else to mention about it. It's just really good.
One other thing that I was going to mention about that type of SSVC production is the way that it shows that doctrine shifts. I was doing a bit of digging for this episode, and a rich subgenre of SSVC training film is the weapons safety training film, which include Designed to Kill, An Unthinking Moment, is an absolute classic from 1988.
Yeah, classics.
And It Could Be You. And these are all training films that try and emphasize weapons safety, not being negligent, not fucking about, basically.
Don't cock about with a gun. It's a bit obvious.
There's a lot of faffing around and like stupid shit gets done, like people like sliding guns down desks and people grabbing muzzles and pulling them around. But one thing that stood out to me is that every so many years they remake these films, and it's the same with the fibula as well. So there's a Clearing Villages from the 50s, early 50s. It's got kangaroos in it, Rob. It's amazing.
It's really good. I've seen it. It's great.
And then in the 70s and the 80s, you get fighting in villages.
Yeah.
It's very similar. But we'll talk about those. I think that actually would make a great episode to talk about the two of them together. Maybe we'll do that.
It would, yeah. We get Kenton back on for those, I think.
Yeah, that'd be great fun. But as I was saying, so it shows that while a lot of them show like doctrinal change and equipment and kit, others, they repeat the same messages because they're telling people to be safe with ordnance, munitions, and small arms and the kit they're using. So, Not Worth Dying For is a Royal Army Ordnance Corps film, and you mentioned I think it's Designed to Kill is the one with the little girl, or no, it's a little boy that takes
I think so.
Carl Gustav around, isn't it?
They all get a bit, they blur into one, all those three.
So I think it's Designed to Kill, and he finds a spent Carl Gustav round on the range, and he puts it on the bonnet of a Ford Escort or something, and it rolls.
Blows up that poor people having a picnic or something. But he did have the coolest thing in that video. He had an Airfix SLR.
He did.
He's the coolest kid I've ever seen.
I mean, I hope the Airfix SLR wasn't within blast radius.
Obliterated, no. Some kid would have found that and be like, oh, mega, an SLR. I couldn't think of a 70s slang.
Charlie G round and an Airfix SLR. But Not Worth Dying For from 56 has a very similar scene where some lads are doing grenade training and they throw a blind and it doesn't go off and they forget about it. And a little girl comes along and picks it up. And that kills her. So there's those same scenarios that like 20 years apart. And they all have those similar little sequences of gun safety. And I think in It Could Be You, a chap jumps off the back of a Bedford with a Sterling cock.
That's it, yeah.
And shoots his mate in the back.
Yeah.
And then in 88's Unthinking Moment, there's a chap that slides a high power down a desk.
Yeah.
Shoots another guy.
And there's that guy that thinks the SA-80 is a grade A weapon. And it's like, if there's any weapons in the video, it's him. He's the biggest weapon going.
He was towing the line, Rob, okay?
He's reading a script, bless him. But he got rinsed for that in the naffy, like, for months after. And his mate's like, grade A, is it, Graham? Grade A, is it? I'll go back to the Saxon, get a Sterling out. At least I know it fucking works.
But as I was saying, it's another one of those nuances that these films portray, and it's really interesting how they evolve and the messages that they're trying to get across and the way they do it, because it varies from like really serious stuff to like that RAF film about base safety with Windsor Davis, where he's
that's really good. Hazardous ops. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. But it shows that this is the thing. I think what we come to is that they're all filmed in different ways for different purposes. And they all have, some of them have a bit more that they lean into sort of the soapy elements of it, and some of them are a lot more hard line. And then you get something like SBS Oil Safe, and that has to be very down the middle.
Some of them are very dry, and
some of them are very dry. Yeah, exactly.
And it varies from, because they weren't all made by SSVC. This is another thing to emphasize. So like SSVC was sort of the umbrella, and they made sure that certain things were done certain ways. But they worked with loads of different production companies.
Yes.
To name a few, like Films of Today, British Films Consultancy Limited, Jared Holdsworth Productions, RHR Productions, Anvil Group, and Worldwide Pictures. So if you look at the end of these, you get loads of these different little production companies, British production companies, working with SSVC, and SSVC kind of oversee and direct things, I feel. I just think it's a really fascinating.
They must put out like a
British military history where it's like this production company is helping to portray and convey doctrine and training and stuff. And people don't really know about it.
No, but hopefully after this episode they will.
Hello, I'm David Willey. I'm the curator from the Tank Museum, and you're listening to Fighting on Film.
But later than planned, we've got last week's fourth hypothetical. And it was, you can replace any character from any film into a war film role of your choice. Who and why? We had some good ones. Seri Thomas says, replace Nicolas Cage and John Woo with caps anybody, and Wind Talkers might have been a decent film.
I mean, harsh but true.
Well, I quite like it.
It'll be a great one to like
It will be.
To debate that when we get round to it, that's for sure.
Well, maybe I liked it when I was little. Maybe I'll be super critical now. Who knows?
Well, this is it. Yeah, this is always the way.
Fighting on
I always just
film,
remember
ruining childhood memories again.
I know, right? That sequence where it's just hand to hand lads coming out of nowhere in that little building with Christian Slayers
Right at the end.
Hardcore.
With the BAR. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all I remember because I haven't
day.
seen it in like 20 years. I do remember that
I've got and bought the steel book of it because I quite liked it. I might be the only person on earth who bought the 2-disc collector steel book.
I did actually. I do. To be fair, I did like how they portrayed the early campaign.
Yeah,
like a bolt action rifle and an M1928 Thompson, and then skip on to like mid-war, and he's
and it has an almost movie-killing sequence in the first half hour in the hospital, and you're like, how's it picking up from here? And then it does. But anyway, another day. And then we have Janice UK. He says the entire cast of the Muppets into any training montage movie. Personally, I'm favouring Dirty Dozen with Lee Marvin as the only human character.
All the way ahead.
The
way ahead. We'll just keep living.
Just keep living. Is that your choice? Then is it?
That's my choice.
Seeing like Fozzie Bear whiz on a vicar's gun. No, but that would be great though, Janice. I think that would be really good. If you were savvy with editing, I reckon you could edit that up anyway.
I mean, in this day and age,
probably could, yeah. And then in the same vein, Ken Campbell says, Dogs of War replace Tom Berenger with Kermit the Frog. I want to see the 9mm quad scene.
Just any Kermit the Frog reaction face in a war movie would be quality, I think.
Welcome to Zangaro. Adam Warren says, Buster, here they come again. Kill Rain from Gettysburg with frankly anyone, but for me personally, no one. Just leave him out.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And then we had Mark C said, Major Kilgore in Apocalypse Now to Bridge Too Far into Elliot Gould's Colonel Stout. The bridge would not have blown up in his face. And then that begged the question, Robert Duvall, why isn't Robert Duvall in A Bridge Too Far anyway?
Yeah, because, I mean, that's the period. He's big right at that time.
But you could have easily got him in because it's the same. Anyway, we'll never know. And then we had Joe Wilding, who said, insert Forrest Gump into Inglourious Bastards. And I wasn't sure whether he meant the spaghetti war movie, the Italian one from the 60s, or the Tarantino one, but it would work either way.
just Forrest Gump running members of the section out of the cinema as it burns.
And that's like this, like mirrors the scene from the movie where he runs back into the napalm. That'd be brilliant. Anyway, but before we end this episode, Matt, would you replace anyone? What would you replace if you could?
Ooh, replace someone with someone. I mean, it's a really good question, Rob. I do like these hypotheticals. I'm just all I can
replace the entire cast of Dunkirk and start from scratch.
replace Harry Styles with anyone.
True. Secret sauce. Fucking hell. Every time. I can't not hear that line. Every time I hear his name spoken.
All I can think of now is Niven just disapprovingly looking at members of the Muppets as they try and like cross a obstacle course.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Kermit the Frog on a Vickers gun or a 6-pounder.
Jiggling about. Is it like, oh, that would be great.
Piggy on a 6-pounder, yeah.
Yeah. All the Muppets trying to push Dame Latingo off of that ship. Push everybody, come on. Trevor Howard standing there like, what the fuck's going on?
Trevor Howard's face looking at Muppets.
So disapprovingly. Anyway, no, that's a great thing to end on there. That mental image for everyone.
Oh my God. But anyway, as we said, this episode was intended to be an homage to the SSVC, which is something that Rob and I bonded over and really love and think is an absolutely fascinating aspect of British military history.
So Matt wants me to read out the intro because he's corpsing over Trevor Howard looking at Muppets. So, as always, don't forget to follow us on the socials, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, at Fighting on Film on most things, and you'll be able to find us. And you can find the entire back catalogue, as you're probably well aware by now, fightingonfilm.com. Who knows, you might start episode 1 and try and catch us up. We'd love to know if you do. And leave us a review on Apple Pods if you would be so kind. And we will come back next week with another war movie, but we don't know what one yet, so stay tuned.
We haven't picked. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.